Cadillac. I've got the top row back on a southern born and cloudy day, down a long stretch of highway. I know this day's gonna be my friend, long as I'm here, baby, in the flatlands, Mississippi flatlands.
Welcome to the Only One Shot Golf Podcast. I'm Jim Gallagher Jr. I want to thank Steve Azar for allowing us to use his music. You can find Steve at steveazar.com. Thanks for joining us today, and we appreciate all those folks out there who have been listening. We've enjoyed doing these. And don't forget to subscribe to wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to get your copy of Only One Shot. That's by VJ Trolio, and that's available on Amazon. Today we have one of the best college coaches in men's golf. That's Ryan Hybl of Oklahoma. Played his college golf at Georgia, and he has continually and consistently had the Oklahoma Sooners ranked in the top 5, top 10. They just finished up the spring season a few months ago, losing in the finals to Pepperdine, and he continually has some of the best players and has some of the best teams, and it's been fun to get to know him. I got to see him at Maridoe a week or so ago where they won the second tournament of the year. So let's get Ryan on the phone and hope to get y'all to get to know him a little bit better. Well, I promised you Ryan Hybl, and I've got him on the phone. Ryan, thanks for spending some time with me today.
I appreciate it, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
Well, your Oklahoma Sooners are off to another good season. I saw you at Maridoe. Y'all won that event second the week before. How are you continuing to keep this team going and every year always having a very competitive team?
Well, I mean, it's one of the, biggest pieces of our program, I feel like, is trying to create an environment, a culture of high expectations and work and getting better. And we lost a lot of firepower last year. Jonathan Brightwell, Quade Cummins, Garrett Reban, a couple other seniors, Riley Casey and Thomas Johnson, who were great depth for us as well. And, people keep asking me, well, you guys are going to take you're going to probably go backwards a little bit. And we never once have ever thought that. I mean, every year, we continue to lose guys every year, and we have to be able to replace them. That's why we go out and recruit like we do. And the guys back home, they've been chomping at the bit to get their opportunity, right? So all their battle scars and just opportunities back home to compete and get better are hoping, that's my hope, is that it's going to allow them to shine. So I guess the long-winded answer is, we're trying to prepare our guys back at the house to get them ready to go to a place like Maridoe and get them ready, even though it's super early in the season. Some of these guys have been doing this for a couple of years now. Yeah,
you mentioned that. It's like guys come to Oklahoma schools like that because they want to get better and they want to have a chance to maybe go in further in the line. But you beat your your Texas rival there, the back nine. We talked about the second day. Y'all kind of let some shots get away, but man, you finished so strong that final day to take the title. What was it like those last few moments? What's going through your mind? And I mean, do you obviously the pressure's there, and you've got confidence in your players, but what are you telling your players those last few holes?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I mean, if we back up into the second round, the wind really popped up on us on 13 as we finished. So we did lose some shots to the field to the guys that were at the top of the leaderboard. But they had finished up, right as the wind, kind of popped up on us. So I actually, felt like we caught a little bit of a tough break, and we didn't handle that adversity very well. But those are hard holes, and the wind over on 16, which is a par 5, one of the, I would say, easier holes out there, was turned into a very difficult hole. And so we gave up a few shots on paper, but again, we're just learning. We're young. We're trying to figure some things out. And we had a nice conversation afterwards, just fighting through that and understanding the opportunity is still in front of us. And our guys just did a great job coming down the stretch. I mean, number 15 through 18, I want to say we made 4 birdies and 1 bogey out of a group. When you're counting 4 scores, that's pretty strong, especially on a golf course like that where you're kind of one swing away from something not very good happening. And, just really proud of how our guys finished. We talk about it all the time. Because it's such a unique aspect with our game. It's, when you've got 4 to 5 guys rolling around a golf course finishing up, boy, it can put you over the top, or it can really hurt you too. So, it's a point of emphasis for us finishing strong every single day, no matter what we're doing.
Yeah, you got to be proud of the way the guys finished, without a doubt. I mean, I started doing this podcast to try to get, for the people listening, to junior golfers, college players, get some coaches like yourself on there, and just want to try to find out what separates that elite player and get to know the coaches a little better. But let's go back to you and who got you started playing, and maybe some big influences early on in your junior career.
Well,
you were a football guy, I know that.
Now. Yeah, well, yeah, I grew up in a little small town in South Georgia, Hazelhurst, Georgia. We only had 5,000 people that even lived in the town, and 9-hole golf course. Never was in good shape, but it was actually a great layout. It taught me how to escape and do some things. It was really tight, pine tree, sandy, off the beaten trail everywhere. So really had to figure out how to have some craft in your game to get around the golf course. And from, myself growing up, it's very different. I'm getting older in my age now. I've just turned 40 this year, where the old generation of us talking about the old has-been way, everybody's so specialized now. I mean, I played 4 different sports growing up. It was football season. It was golf season during the summertime, mixed in a little bit with baseball as well, and basketball was winter. So, that's the household that I kind of grew up in. We were a very sport-driven family. My dad was a high school football coach in Hazelhurst, and he actually played college golf at Mississippi State. So a lot of golf background in our family with him, and he led myself and my brother into the game at a very young age. But just fortunate, to be honest with you, to grow up in a small town where I rode my bike with my golf clubs on my back during the summertime out to the golf course, and we played 36 holes and swam. And I drank. I tell my daughters this all the time, how we just didn't know about anything. I mean, I remember it being so hot where, the sprinklers would be depressed down, and they would run, and I'd be, just hallucinating out on the golf course because I was so hot. And I drink that water, and that was actually gray water.
Oh, gosh.
I didn't even know that at the time. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, hey, this was the old school way back in the late 80s and early 90s. And I loved everything about just athletics in general, competing. I was fortunate to have a 2-year older brother that was very good at golf as well. So I was always trying to beat up on him, and he truly made me become, the athlete that I was at a young age. And, so my dad, my brother, they were my huge influences early on. There's no doubt about that. And then as we went through, my junior golf career and into my college career, I ended up going to the University of Georgia, and Chris Hack, who's still one of my best friends, he was my coach, him and Jim Douglas, who are still there, and just great people along the way, and just truly blessed to be able to be around the game for a long time. I've got a lot of relationships that have, span out over, 30 years now worth, and just really fortunate.
I didn't know your dad was a Mississippi State Bulldog. My kids will love that because I had 3 of my kids go there. My family is big State fans. Of course, I'm a Tennessee guy, but I'm kind of the outcast. My wife's LSU, so we're all messed up in our family. So with that, but you said if you haven't had a sip out of a hose, then you've never lived. I mean, that's the best time of the summer. But you mentioned multiple sports and specializing, and I'm a big proponent of kids playing multiple sports because I think it benefits them. And especially if you go into the team golf, because golf's such an individual sport. But what are some of the benefits you feel like playing multiple sports and encouraging kids to maybe do that?
Yeah, I truly believe in being able to learn all these in these other areas. When you talk about basketball, let's use them as an example. My 8th grader is heavy into basketball, and she. The type of lessons that she's learning on a day-to-day basis of it's not about yourself. You really have to make other people look good at times, competing and working for each other, wanting to be in the foxhole. with your buds and your teammates and your coaches, that's where that's what gets my juices flowing, and that's honestly the type of environment that we try and promote here at our place as far as with team golf, because golf is a unique sport that there's only a couple times you play team golf. High up it's the Ryder Cup, which is going on this week, and and in amateur golf it's the Walker Cup. Then you obviously have college golf and high school golf. But high school golf, a lot of times the really good players are kind of left on an island because they're so much better than everybody else, and it can be tough environment in the high school area. So college golf is really the last standing team environment for these guys, and for our guys to wrap their arms around what that means to lean on each other and really work for each other and push. I can be a great coach back at the house, but our guys are the best coaches, but the best motivators. That's my job, is to surround them with phenomenal players that want to work. It's not even necessarily about the talent level to a certain point. It's about who genuinely can get the most out of their games on a day-to-day basis and maximize who they are as people, because that is what's going to allow our guys to continue to get better, is by over a 4 to 5 year time period of them coming out here and beating each other up in a good way, competitively speaking, and understanding, how they can make each other better. And I think a lot of those lessons get learned at a young age in other sports just as much as anything. So going back to the original question, I truly believe that that's a valuable experience.
Yeah, I agree. They talk about you mentioned the Ryder Cup, the Americans, they don't have the chemistry, they don't have this, and I don't know if they want it. They probably want it too much, but chemistry to me comes naturally. But how do you? And you mentioned a very competitive team, and sometimes roommates have to beat the other out for that spot, and then they got to go back and live together. How do you keep that chemistry, and how do you balance that competitive spirit there, but also keeping them from disliking each other or having some hating the guy? Because I remember David Toms. This is a funny story. David Toms said, he didn't tell me who it was, but I have a feeling who it was on his team. Roommates play against for the last spot, and the one beat the other, and the guy put a piece of tape down the middle of the room, and he said, "You can't cross the line." And he goes, "Well, the sink's on the other side. On your side, I've got to at least brush my teeth." He goes, "Nope, you can't do it." So, it gets to that point. But how do you kind of avoid, that's kind of a fun situation, but how do you keep that chemistry going?
Well, don't get me wrong. It can be tough at times, but I think, for me and how we do things is it's all communication and letting these guys know up front in the recruiting process how it works around here. There's nothing given at our place. Everything is earned, because as you move on from our place, if you want to go play professional golf and just life in general, with whatever you end up deciding to do, nobody's going to give it to you. And so our guys, I feel like they know that up front. So personality-wise, and just people's feelings getting hurt, it can be squashed a little bit in that way if they all know everything that is in front of them. Because it's like, well, if I didn't beat this guy, I'm not going, and so I think as long as we know, the communication side is good, then we can, squash a little bit of that attitude that you're talking about. But ultimately, everybody wants to play. I talk to our football coaches all the time. I've got a room full of quarterbacks and kickers. The defensive guys, offensive guys in football, they all kind of potentially get a chance because they're rotating in and out. But quarterbacks, and there's only one field goal kicker usually. There's only one quarterback that's going to play, and that's kind of what we have a room full of. And managing that can be difficult at times. It really can be. But ultimately, our goal is to try and get better, every single week, every single day. And if we have guys that even aren't playing for us that can still put a value on them getting better, that's a win. And I think that they can look back and go, yeah, I know I haven't played here last couple months, but I know that I'm still getting better.
Do you have qualifiers? Because a lot of guys, that's the tricky part for y'all. You have such a good team, so many good players. And as a coach, sometimes your best player, we saw Arizona State, David Pugh didn't make it to Maridoe. didn't make the qualifier. Sometimes I got to keep one in my back pocket. How do you guys run your qualifying?
Well, it changes week to week, based on how guys play. I mean, I've got a pretty stock rule that if you finish top 15, you're exempted into the following week.
Mm-hmm.
Which, depending on the week, we might have one guy do that. We might have four guys do that. Then whenever we get back home, I might have a smaller qualifier that gets you into the bigger qualifier. I mean, we're always qualifying for something, playing for something. But I'm going to tell you a couple of my better stories of qualifying. Max McGreevy, who's about to be on the PGA Tour this year, just got his tour card. Max was one of our better players. I want to say this was 2016-ish. He was going to miss Georgia Tech's event back in Atlanta in the fall, which is one of the better events in the country, and goes out and shoots fine around 66 to pick up the last spot, and he goes into Georgia Tech and wins.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, I can say this with confidence because I've been doing this long enough. If he doesn't do that, he doesn't go win at Georgia Tech because he needed that pressure. He needed to feel it, and he needed to go have some success when his back was against the wall. I mean, if he doesn't do that, he's not going, all right? The next year, Grant Hirschman, who's on the Korn Ferry Tour, very similar situation, coming down to him, Brad Dahlke, and Blaine Hell, all three All-Americans at our place.
Mm.
And we've only got one spot left going to Las Vegas, best tournament in the springtime. They all know that two of them are not going to Vegas on the end of this qualifier. That's because that's where we were at. And Hirschman goes out and does the exact same thing, shoots a final round 66. Guess what? Goes to Vegas, wins.
Wow.
And similar, very, very similar situation. If he doesn't do that, doesn't have that pressure, he doesn't go out to Vegas and win. I say that with 100% validity because I've been doing this too long. And it's one of those things that we just have to try and get our guys to feel very comfortable in these really uncomfortable situations of adrenaline and managing expectations and not just finishing strong, but getting off to a great start. I mean, I think it's a very undervalued piece of the pie when people talk about golf in the first, 3, 4, 5 holes. Just as much as, I mean, number 18 is really not much different in my opinion than number 1 because you're going to have a lot of stressors, a lot of pressure, and guys that can get out there and go make great pars and maybe even a couple birds early on. I love it when guys can get off to a great start, and anyway, that's just a couple thoughts of mine about the qualifying piece.
That's awesome. I mean, it does. It kind of, even All-Americans need a wake-up call. I don't know if the wake-up call, but it kind of got them motivated, got that confidence going because, I mean, you can get kind of lax if you're not careful, and I think the qualifying does keep you aware of it. But you mentioned linebacker mentality, and that was your position in high school. But you also made the Junior Ryder Cup team. I found this out last week. This is interesting. And you chose to play in the football game because I'm sure your dad was going to get onto you about it. But did you play with that linebacker mentality when you were such a great player as a junior and college player? Did you have that same mentality? I mean, it kind of works. I think it would.
Yeah, I think that if you asked any of my buds I grew up with, I know you're talking about Hunter Mayhem's story. I grew up, me and Hunter, we played a lot of golf together. We competed against each other quite a bit. Of course, he ended up having a great professional career. And my life was way different. Once college got done, I ran into some injuries and just a different life. And we all have just crazy paths with this game and whatnot. But, I did. The Junior Ryder Cup, they called me and I got invited, but you got to remember, I still, even this was my sophomore year in high school. At that moment in my life, football, even though I was really good at golf and I was, I don't know, maybe already the number 1 or 2 ranked player in the country, football was just as important, if not more important in my life than golf was. And so because of that, I mean, you're talking about letting your boys down in the locker room. I mean, again, I'm coming from a small school, small town. So you play both sides of the ball. If you're good enough, you're playing both sides of the ball. You don't have a specialty position. I mean, I was a split out tight end. My brother was the quarterback who was a really great quarterback and started at the University of Georgia, then came out here to Oklahoma. But I mean, we didn't have options to sit there and go, hey, you're not going to play this week. You know what I mean? And my dad's a coach, and so there's a lot of pressure with being a coach's kid and trying to be as perfect as you can, especially in the sport that he coaches. And there's just no way I was going to be, I think in theory I was going to miss 2 football games. So that was a pretty easy decision for us at the time. And when I look back on it, I would I have more memories maybe of the Junior Ryder Cup? Maybe I would. I don't know, but I know that I didn't let my boys down.
Well,
which I can sleep at night with.
Well, I think that's why you're such a great team coach, and I think that's what makes you such a great coach is that team mentality. It's you don't want to let anybody down, and that's true. I mean, I know when my girls were playing basketball and there was a possibility of playing a golf tournament, it's like, hey, I'm the starting guard. I can't not play, and it's a tough decision, and you made the right decision. You can't go back and look at it. Yeah. But you talked about your brother being a quarterback, you being a top athlete. What separates that elite athlete or that elite golfer from maybe the rest? I mean, what makes them different? That inner drive, that will to win. What makes them, kind of separate themselves from the rest?
Man, that's a good question. There's a lot going on with that one because I've seen a lot of talented guys in my life. I've been fortunate to be around a lot of really great players. And there's great talent that don't really love the game that still can make it. There's elite thinkers. There's elite attitude and motivators that can make it. But there are all these same things I'm talking about. They can all not make it. So, again, I don't want to call it luck. I think it's just our path, I mean, I've always believed that I had the game growing up to be a PGA Tour player too, but it didn't work out for me, and there's a lot of stories just like myself, but I'm fortunate enough to be around a bunch of young guys every day that I can hopefully, influence to a certain degree and help them. That's my path, and so true elite athlete, though, I mean, you've got to be able to do something better than everybody else, whatever that is. Tim Simpson, an old Georgia Bulldog, he used to always tell me, they'd be like, Hib, if there's one thing you just got to be better than somebody else at, and I've always kind of stuck to that too. And for me, I was always a better chipper and putter than everybody else, and throw a little bit of grinding mentality. On top of that, you always felt like I was in the game, no matter how poorly I might hit it. I just knew that I could out putt and out short game everybody. I think there's great drivers of the ball that can just put them in so many, phenomenal spots. Abraham Answer, who's a top 15 player in the world right now, he played for me when he was here at school. He hit 90% of his fairways. I mean, this guy's 5'6". He still moves on it pretty good, but he's never out of play. So what's interesting, this is crazy. Grant Hirschman, who I was talking about earlier, one of my shorter players I've ever had here, has always had our lead par 5 scoring here. And it's because he's in play every time.
Right.
And the big guys, a lot of times they get out of play and they're not able to go for the par 5s and 2. Well, Hirsch was able to go for all the par 5s and 2. Same thing with Abe. When you're always in play, you're able to control your ball flight, especially coming out of the fairways. And I just saw a stat recently about Abe that he was still top 25 on the PGA Tour in strokes gained off the tee because he was in play that much, and which I think is really interesting. And anyway, long story short, I think elite players you can come at from so many different angles. The willpower is a must. It's one of the things that I try and do in recruiting is dig in deep to try and figure out, we got to have guys that love to play golf. And I can't, put more emphasis on that because loving to play golf is a lot harder than what people think it is. And whenever you get out on playing professional golf and you have no team around you, you still have to want to go play in that fundraiser on Monday and pro-am and still go put in your work on the practice round and go put in 4 days of tournament golf and go do it for 5 straight weeks. And that's a tough life, like I mean, you did it as well as anybody. So well,
that's well said. That's a great answer. It's always one of the hardest questions I ask because That's why I started this podcast. VJ Trolio wrote the book Only One Shot, and it says what makes elite golfers elite, and it's just such a cool book, and it's such a great question because people want to know. I mean, to get to that level. How do you get to that level? You mentioned your dad's a coach. I had Ryan Cabbage on a couple weeks ago. His dad was a high school coach. How much did that influence you maybe to get into coaching after you got hurt? Because, I mean, you said it best. You got to love to play the game, and I actually fell out of love with it there for a while, and I spent time with my family, which I would never regret doing that for 10 years. That was the best time of my life. But how much did it influence that your dad was coaching maybe help you get into coaching?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. There's no doubt I wouldn't be, coaching if well, I shouldn't say that. I don't think I would be coaching if my dad wasn't a coach. I mean, I grew up in a locker room since I was literally, in diapers. And so, I was able to listen and learn, not just from him, but other coaches and see what work and work ethic and trying to get the most out of a group of guys was like as an 8-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
So I was just very fortunate to be in that situation. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why, you take a look at a lot of these other sports, forget about golf, but, if there's a coach's kid out there that you can go recruit, a lot of times football coaches, basketball coaches, baseball coaches, they're going to go get those folks because
Mm-hmm.
they know that it's inbred in them that that culture of teamwork and getting the most out of yourself. They might not be the most talented. Right now on our football team, Drake Stoops, that's Bob Stoops'
Mm-hmm.
son. He's one of our wide receivers. And from a talent perspective, you probably wouldn't say he's one of the most talented out there, but man, the guy is a grinder, and he's been around it his whole life. And just that osmosis process definitely works. And it's not much different than what I've always felt about PGA Tour kids, the sons that I've been able to be around growing up. I grew up with Bill Haas and
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Stadler and those boys, and they might not have been the best junior golfers early on, but then it's like it kicks in. They've been listening and being around great players full time, and it's like at some point it just kind of kicks in if they have just a little bit of talent. So,
what else do you look for in a player? Because the kids listen and the parents listen. And when you're recruiting kids, what else are you looking for?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and again, it's kind of
a hard answer.
It's a hard answer because I'm looking for what fits our place
Mm-hmm.
and what fits me.
Mm-hmm.
And from a golf perspective, usually you can watch about 5 holes until I can kind of already sit there and go, well, I really like what I see out of this guy, or this guy, I need to kind of come back to this guy, or maybe he doesn't pass the eye test just yet, but. I mean, the true indicators are happen a lot more when you're able to create the relationships and figure out, what makes them tick a little bit more. Those are the things, because trust me, I get it as a parent, my 8th grader, hopefully she's going to be good enough to get recruited in basketball. When you're a parent, you think about things a lot differently. And when you see somebody else get scooped up that you think your kid's better than, immediately, well, that's what we do, right? As parents,
Mm-hmm.
we compare. We go, wait a second, how does this happen? How does this, how are they going here? And the answer is there is no great answer. Some things that the puzzle just fits. Somebody might fit with a coach. Somebody might, especially even in our sport, it might be a financial situation.
Sure.
A coach might not have any scholarship, and somebody's willing to kind of come and do it for little to no money. I mean, that could end up being an issue. I mean, we only work with 4.5 scholarships on our side, right? So, you're always trying to piece together a puzzle that's every year it's not the same, and trying to manage that 3 to 4 to 5 year cycle can be difficult. I think it's actually one of the most undervalued pieces in equivalency sports. From a coaching perspective, is trying to figure out who can actually manage their bookkeeping the best. Trying to get guys and girls, depending on what sport they're playing, for the value that maybe that they can get them at before they all see fit. So again, it's one of those things that never gets talked about, but I think it's a big part of our industry and college sports on the equivalency side, when you're trying to, sell somebody that 30% is a good deal.
Yeah.
That's a hard conversation. That's a hard conversation, right?
Well, especially when they've spent 10, 15, 20,000 a year. And that's one thing for the people listening. I mean, have a budget when you're going to play junior tournaments. It's going to cost you some cash. Yeah. And you mentioned that is, you got 4.5 scholarship and recruiting's changed so much from when you were being recruited to now, even in your years coaching. And we were just talking about before we started the podcast that, last year you were doing Zoom calls. Now you're back in person. That had to be a big challenge because it's a big difference between a Zoom call and in person.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's certain folks that can really stick out and just sound that much better on a Zoom call or a phone call versus being in person. And the COVID recruiting was really interesting, and I'll be interested to see what that does to the portal over the next 3 or 4 years. People hopping in there because maybe just it sounded good, felt right during COVID, but then once you kind of dig in and get to school, you go, maybe that didn't work out like we thought, and maybe it's at no fault other than we just kind of got dealt a bad hand at the time, but. I think all of us coaches across the country tried to do as much as we could to really dig in and figure out, the kids and where, who they were. But it's hard, man. Is it hard? I mean, it's so nice to be able to have everybody back on campus again, and just really excited about being able to create those, relationships like we used to be able to do, and just very thankful.
You mentioned OU and the great support you have. Football team's great. The whole sports athletic department's fantastic. That has to help big time. But how do you stay competitive year after year? It's such a tough conference, and then nationally, because it's getting, as you said, tougher and tougher. How do you all been able to stay competitive in your conference and nationally? Because it's a tough deal. There's so many great players, and do you pay attention to the rankings? Is that something you pay attention to, or do you try to deflect that with the kids?
Yeah, I mean, we pay attention maybe as motivation at times, more so than anything. But no, I mean, early on, I could care less about what the rankings say. Coming down the stretch, you actually pay attention to it because it does dictate regionals and your seeding and whatnot. But and it also affects All-American type stuff. So obviously I'm looking at certain things like that. I served on the All-American committee for like 6 years, so I kind of got used to looking at certain things. But we're in a sport where it continues to grow at a high level with junior golf. So no matter what Division I college golf team you're at, you really have a chance. Mid majors, smaller programs. I mean, you just saw Pepperdine just won the national championship last year.
Right.
They're not in a Power 5 conference. I think that story can be written all over the country. You get the right couple guys in there with great momentum and great mojo, good energy, and all of a sudden they can bring the juice on anybody. And because it's still golf, and it's 5 guys. It's not like we have a roster of 85 guys, rolling around. You're still only counting 4 scores. So, we've seen it over the years. I mean, Augusta State, they won 2 national championships back to back. That's not that long ago. I mean, that was 2010-11, back to back. I mean, that's incredible to think about that. So, I mean, there's just great players all over the place, and, people go overseas and get great international guys. I mean, it's not just here in the States. So just, and I tell my guys all the time, the travel and circus, the junior golf that we kind of come to know and love. And I'm a huge fan of like the AJGA. I was a big part of their years way back when. I actually worked for them for a little bit too at one point in my life. There's a lot of players that don't play in the AJGA.
You're right.
and all of a sudden they show up in college and you go, who is this guy?
Yep.
And where did they come from? Well, that's the way it is forever. You look up and you're 30 years old and somebody developed in their early 20s into this, stud golfer. And all of a sudden by the time they're 30, they're a top 50 player in the world. There's no, you don't have to be great at 16 in order to be great at 35. That's for sure. And again, I'm a prime example. I was one of the best players in this country from the time I was 15 to, arguably 21, 22, and I'm not even playing anymore.
Right.
And there's guys in my same age group that I was playing with that are still, making gazillions of dollars out there that I could beat like a drum back when we were 16. So, it's a perfect example of, you just got to keep, going through the grind and trying to get better every single day and hope that it works out. You
mentioned Jim Canals last week, had a chance to win, went to the Colorado School of Mines. He's on tour.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like they're everywhere. And that's the tricky part, to try to find that diamond in the rough. Now, this is another tricky question. How would you want your players to describe you as a coach? I asked Ryan Cabbage this, and he was almost speechless. I should have given you a warning, because that's a tough question. But how would you want? How would you want them to describe you? Because you said you mold young men's lives. That's part of what you do. But how would you want them to describe you?
Yeah, but I'd want them to just be able to sit there and honestly say that I'm willing to help them in every area of their life, not just with golf, but to be able to have a great relationship with them. We just had our big fundraiser this past week, and we had over 35 former players come back out of, we had about 200 people here, but 35 of them were former players, and that really gets me excited when guys want to come back, because I know that means that we've done our job as well along the way to create the relationship piece. But if I have a guy that reaches out to me outside of team practice and wants to work, I just would want them to know that I've always got their back, and that they can ultimately trust that we're doing everything in my power to help them get to where they want to be. And that's what I would want them to say. I don't know if if you ask them, they go, "Well, coach is a mean cuss." No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
My meanness, I've tailored my early years, and when we were trying to change the culture around here, my earlier guys have got some way funnier stories about me than probably my most recent guys, because I'm just different. I took this job when I was 27 years old, and didn't really know too much about much, right? I was just a young inexperienced guy. But I now, as I look back, I hope that all my guys would say that he's willing to, he'd do anything for us.
I assure you they do. That's a great way to end the podcast. But as I always kind of end it, is whether life or golf, you may have only one shot. You got to make it count. You're making it count in countless lives. It's been great to get to know you. It's like I told Ryan Cabbage once I met him. He had me at hello. It's great to do this podcast because I get to know you guys. I get everybody out there listening to know y'all. What's next for you? And then I'm going to let you go.
Yeah, so we're going on to Colonial for the Colonial Collegiate in 2 weeks. Just a great golf course. It's one of those golf courses that you just would love to play every single day if you could. And it's up against maybe the toughest field of the fall. So we're really looking forward to the challenge, the opportunity. And then we head to our Big 12 match play and then on to Eastlake. So hopefully our fans will be able to check us out again on national television with the Golf Channel there towards the end of October.
Well, appreciate you spending some time with us. I know you're a busy man, and it's been great catching up. And looking forward to covering you, because I'm going to cover you. I'll be in the studio doing Eastlake. But you guys got a good team again. It's been fun watching. It's going to be fun watching as the spring comes along. But good luck.
All right, thanks, Jim. I appreciate it.
I'm in a hurry, one hell of a hurry, 'cause I know you're there waiting to save me. Over old muddy water, cautious claws, mighty water, where I was baptized